Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda, and please welcome to our Operation Freedom platform, WeThePeopleProcessing.com. You know, are you tired of being threatened to be canceled just because you have a company focused on liberty and freedom? Well, worry no more, folks. WeThePeopleProcessing.com is your go-to merchant services, freedom-based company to provide business service payment solutions. We the People Processing provides their clients a cancel culture-free platform which is domestically based. They provide competitive rates, no contracts with next-day funding, a fully vetted and like-minded financial infrastructure, and full support for integrations, implementation, and e-commerce efforts. Bottom line, WeThePeopleProcessing.com focuses on defending your company's free market growth, values, and future. Check them out at www.WeThePeopleProcessing.com. Once you're on the site, enter in password Operation Freedom or call 855-499-2024. That's WeThePeopleProcessing.com. Then, when on the website, enter Operation Freedom as your password or call 855-499-2024.
Welcome back to Operation Freedom, folks. I'm Dr. Dave Janda, broadcasting from our ancillary bunker linked to our main Freedom Bunker in the People's Republic of Ann Arbor. We're here every Sunday for you from 2 to 5 Eastern live, available 24/7 at davejanda.com. Stop on by. Tremendous amount of free public content, as well as, of course, the subscription content, which goes into great depth, great analysis with great guests, as well as our own analysis that you're not going to get from any other source. Why? Because I provide it to no other source. We're there for you 24/7 at davejanda.com. It is a freedom platform like no other. We hope you become part of our freedom family. The recurrent theme of today's show is about standing up. What did George Washington say? I'll die on my feet before I'll live on my knees. That is true of every one of the guests we have today. They have put their lives on the line for bringing you information that the bought-off lamestream fake media, that some people still call the mainstream media, is a tentacle of the deep state. That tentacle will never bring you information that makes you safer, more secure, healthier. It puts you in front of events. They want you behind the 8 ball because you're an easier victim that way. My next guest has been targeted by what I call the global. I've been calling them for years the globalist syndicate, and they are a syndicate. But by definition, they have become a cult. The globalist cult despises Harley Schlanger. Why? Because Harley has been a pain in their side, exposing their nefarious activities and agenda for years. And at first, many people would say, well, Harley's a good guy, but that's kind of conspiracy theory. And then they came to realize it might be conspiracy, but what Harley was speaking about was conspiracy reality. For those of you not familiar with Harley, he's been the spokesman for LaRouche since 1999. He's seen it all and done it all, folks. He has written extensively on financial fraud, going all the way back to the mid-1980s and the savings and loan crisis and Michael Milliken and junk bonds. But Harley also covered the effects of banking deregulation and the shift of the United States from a productive manufacturing economy to a speculative casino economy. And that was not an accident that occurred, by the way, as Harley has pointed out. It was purposeful to put us behind that globalist cult 8-ball. Harley is often interviewed on radio and TV programs and topics ranging from financial fraud to reversing the crisis with a return to the American system of physical economics. He has lectured widely on these topics on campuses throughout the United States and Europe. Website, LaRouche, LaRouche, organization.com. It is my honor to welcome back freedom fighter extraordinaire, Harley Schlanger. Harley, welcome back to the Operation Freedom show and platform.
Hi, Dave. I'm glad to be with you.
Harley, I want to start off with in the House of Representatives in the United States, Congress, Steny Hoyer recently went on record about the deep state. And he, Hoyer has always been that the deep state, this globalist syndicate or this globalist cult, is a figment of people's imagination. Well, actually, he changed his tune a bit. And I want to play this clip and then get your take. Derek, hit it.
That's what the previous president suggested. That's what his supporters are suggesting now. And they're suggesting not only that, but they're going to put people in place who want to follow their political edicts, legal or not. They made it quite clear. They want to eliminate what they call the deep state. The deep state is a cadre of professionals dedicated to honoring the Constitution, the laws of this country, and carrying out the policies of the Congress and the President. By the way, it is the Congress that makes policy.
Harley?
I hadn't heard that. Yeah. But what's clear is that he's not acknowledging there's a deep state, because what he's saying is there are professional bureaucrats whose loyalty is to the Constitution. And there are a few of those left, but mostly they've been weeded out over a long period of time and replaced by, at best, mediocrities, but at worst, opportunists who are looking to make a fortune after their career in government is over. And you find them in the military, you find them in the intelligence community, in the FBI. People for so many years kept telling me the FBI, they're really honorable, they're good people, and there are honorable and good people there. But certainly not the people who ran Russiagate. We just had this atrocity with this character who lied to the FBI about the Steele report, which was then used to set up a spy operation against the Trump campaign, with FBI agents asserting that this was accurate, this report was accurate about Russia, when they knew it wasn't. Now, those are honest people living up to the Constitution to defend the country. I mean, Hoyer is obviously speaking knowing that no one will challenge him. But this concept of a deep state is the professional bureaucracy inside the government, which has loyalty not to the Constitution or the American people, but to the people who are financing and are making the reaping the profits while the country's going to hell. And I think, Hoyer obviously knows better. He's just an unscrutable, immoral person.
One of the mechanisms they use, Harley, as you have pointed out for many years, the globalist cult, to get more power, more control, and more of their ever-precious financial resources. One of the mechanisms they have always used, to great success of theirs and great harm to those of us that are not part of this cult, this globalist cult, is the institution of war. Harley, this is where the Russia-Ukraine situation comes to the forefront at this point. Harley, in our country, we don't have money for a border wall. We don't have money for supply chains. We don't have money for infrastructure. We don't have money to shore up our supply chains or our baby food formula shortages. We don't have money for anything, but we've sent over about $80 billion now, one way or another, to Ukraine since February 24th, 2022. And now This just hit from Dave DeCamp. Lawmakers seek to pass an additional 50 billion in new Ukraine aid before the next Congress convenes. Harley, your take on all this?
Well, that's the plan that was floated this week after Kevin McCarthy shocked people by saying that the House Republican leader shocked people by saying that we should start questioning the money that's going to Ukraine. And of course, Rand Paul was one of the first people who questioned it when he put up an amendment demanding an inspector general determine where the money's going. But the deeper issue here is the economic cause of this war, which is still not known to most Americans. But let me just give you a quote from Vladimir Putin that puts this in the proper context. He said at this Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting in September 16th, fundamental transformations are taking place in world politics and economics, and these are irreversible changes. Mm-hmm. Now, what the American people don't know is that what Putin and his allies in the BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa alliance, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and a number of others, what they're saying is they're no longer going to bow down to the lords of the City of London and Wall Street. They're no longer going to sign away the future of their people so that the powers in London and Wall Street, backed by NATO military force, can loot their country. Now, this is becoming a very visible issue. Take the United Kingdom. What happened to Liz Truss? She believed that she was pushing all the right buttons. She was for the war. She was for the tax cut for the wealthy. She was for the quantitative easing, then quantitative tightening, then quantitative easing, going back and forth. But everything she was saying was for the masters of the City of London. And they dumped her. Why? Because the people of the United Kingdom are hungry. They're shivering in the dark. And she's not a good salesman for this austerity policy. Neither is Biden. But the American people haven't quite reached the level of deprivation that we're seeing throughout Europe. I think that's going to change. And what we should realize is that we have allies around the world who don't like this deep state, who have been targeted by it. Not just people in Libya and Iraq and Syria and elsewhere, but in many countries around the world, including Brazil and Argentina. There have been coups. There have been wars launched to defend this looting operation. And the reason they're doing that is because they can't sustain the level of indebtedness that they've created and that is the basis of their wealth. If your wealth is paper money, stocks and bonds, at a certain point, it's got to be converted to something real. What's happening is we're reaching a point where that's not going to be possible. And there was a very interesting comment made by a former, I think, the Chancellor of Austria. She said, you can print money, but you can't print fuel and food. And that's where the question of physical economy and the reality of the shipwreck of Western economic policy has come from. And now they're terrified that with Russia standing up saying, we believe in sovereign nations, that some of the countries around the world are suddenly adopting that perspective. For example, Dave, what about Saudi Arabia, which is a creation of the British Empire and the U.S. oil companies, telling Biden to take a leap off of a short pier, that they're not going to go along with the sanctions policy. They're not going to go along with the oil policy of Biden. And that the Saudis are now talking about joining the BRICS.
Right.
So we're seeing what Putin called a fundamental transformation. It's happening, but Americans don't know about it because of what you just talked about, the lying media, which is part of this corporate cartel. It's an integral part, and the American people are the victims of this kind of psychological warfare that's designed to keep them in the dark about the reality of what they're facing.
Harley, you spoke about Saudi Arabia being considered, and I believe it's actually more than a consideration, to join the BRICS countries, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa group of countries. Educate our listeners on why that is so important, because in the recent past, the BRICS countries, and now they're talking to Saudi Arabia, have spoken about there needs to be a new reserve currency rather than the dollar, one that is based on physical commodities such as gold, silver, oil, natural resources. Educate our listeners on the significance of Saudi Arabia talking about, and more than talking as I understand it, joining the BRICS countries.
Well, the significance is very straightforward. They're looking at the collapse of Western society, not just the physical economic collapse, but the moral collapse. The fact that the leadership of these countries lie repeatedly, that they claim to be democracies, and yet when a country votes against their will, they overturn that country, they overthrow it, they launch coups and wars and assassinations. And many of these countries have been victims of that, such as Indonesia, such as Brazil and Argentina, such as Chile, such as Greece, have been subjected to coups when they don't go along with NATO. And now, because Russia is standing up, and because China is a strong enough economy that whether you like everything they do or not, they're not going to bow down to the lords and masters of London. And so countries are beginning to find their inner courage, as in the case of the South African foreign minister who told Blinken, don't come here to bully us, we're a sovereign nation. We're seeing that in Brazil, with Bolsonaro and Lula basically saying they're not going to go along with the sanctions against Russia. Argentina, Algeria, I can give you lists of countries that make up the majority of the world's population that until recently, many of them have suffered the demands of the World Bank and the IMF that their priority is to pay the debt to the West and do it through providing cheap raw materials and cheap labor. They're not going to do that anymore. Now, that means that the relative prosperity we've had in the West that's depended to some extent on these policies is over. Now, where did we have prosperity before this? We had it from the physical economy in the United States. Mm-hmm. We were the first ones with modern steel furnaces, with the Transcontinental Railroad. Most of the rest of the world that wanted to develop took as their model what was done in the United States. They studied Hamilton, they studied Lincoln, they studied someone named Henry Carey and Friedrich List, who are the authors of what is known as the American system of physical economy. We don't have that in our schools anymore. We have derivatives trading. We have financialization of everything. We have privatization and deregulation. Now, the way they get away with this is that there are a lot of stupid regulations that have been passed to control people's lives. But where we need regulation to control the cabal of criminals in the financial community that are stealing from us, that's all been taken out. That's been eliminated, like Glass-Steagall. So this is the fight that we're in. And what's interesting is that countries that most Americans wouldn't look to in the past are the ones who are closer to the real American system than we are right now. And they're rebelling. Look, here in Europe, we're seeing growing demonstrations, 150,000 in Paris last week during the week. The strike wave that's going on in England, in Belgium, the Czech Republic, people marching in Italy with signs saying no to the European Union, no to NATO. I don't know if that's being shown in the American media, but this is something that's completely new. In Germany, which has been a subservient country, allowed the pipeline, which was built by Germans and Russians to provide gas to the Germans in the winter, it got blown up. It wasn't blown up by the Russians. No. It was NATO and probably with full support of the United States. Germany has said nothing about it, but the German people know that their government is cowering in fear that they're going to find out that Germany did nothing to protect the energy supplies of the country. So I think there's a huge change that's about to happen. It's not so much if the Republicans sweep the midterms, although that shows the dissatisfaction with Biden. Most of the Republicans don't have the proper policy. Right. They still want the war.
Right.
And so that's where You're doing an incredible job, Dave. People that I know who work with you, like Sarah Westall and quite a few others, are out there trying to get this picture out to Americans. Don't fall for the traps and the lies that are coming from the same people who have been picking your pocket.
Well, the same people that have been picking our pocket and that the American taxpayers have been handing over tens of billions of dollars to are really quite the totalitarian regime in Ukraine. Am I wrong on that, Harley? Because last time you were on with us, a little over a month ago, you were one of the people that were targeted with a kill list. And now it appears that they've added Elon Musk to that because he had the audacity to suggest negotiations for peace rather than bombs. Am I off?
No, they added Elon Musk. They added the president of Uganda, and they added Tucker Carlson. So those three have joined the list, and I'm number 8 on that list. Helga Zepp-LaRouche is the number 1 name on that list. And why is that? Because we've said from the beginning, this is not about freedom and democracy in Ukraine. If the West wanted freedom and democracy in Ukraine, they wouldn't have pulled off the coup in February 2014 that forced the Ukrainians under the International Monetary Fund and has lowered the standard of living there to the lowest in Europe. That wasn't done by Putin. That wasn't done by pro-Russian figures. It was done by the so-called pro-Western coup leaders who worked under the direction of Joe Biden and Victoria Nuland. And Obama, by the way, was totally in support of that coup. So what we see in Ukraine is the shutdown of opposition parties, opposition newspapers, the murder of people who oppose the present regime, and the idea that we're supposed to sacrifice for democracy. If it's real democracy somewhere in a republic, fine. But if it's for a bunch of murderous killers who are doing this on behalf of NATO and the Western banks, and as Lloyd Austin said, what's the goal of this? The Secretary of Defense from Raytheon, the goal is to weaken Russia. Well, if you don't have food to put on your table, if you're an American serviceman and woman and you have to go to food stamps to feed your children, while $60 billion is going into the pockets of the war machine and the Ukrainian corrupt regime, then you should be angry too. And I think if people express this, take it to their congressmen, even if we have not very good people elected in the midterms, we still have right and truth on our side, and we've got to hit them over the head with it because it's hitting us over the head.
Harley, play this out over the next several months. You're brilliant at doing this, but play this out where you think this is going.
Well, I think we're in a situation where we're going to see more developments like what we saw in the United Kingdom. I mean, I don't know if you watched this, Dave, but it was like a Monty Python skit gone bad. Here you had Liz Truss, who is savaged by the people who 2 months ago put her in power. Now they're talking about bringing back Boris Johnson. What are they not talking about? They're not talking about the fact that 10 million people in the United Kingdom are skipping meals because they don't have money. They're not talking about the fact that there's been no wage increases in 5 years for working people, while inflation of energy costs has been 300 to 400%. Same thing's happening in Germany, same thing in France, in Italy. So what I see is there will be rebellions against the political establishment. The question is, will those rebellions be just out of anger and revenge, or will people actually support programs that will work? And what we do at the Schiller Institute, we have regular conferences, we put up videos every day. I do a daily update for people, and if people want to get access to that, send me an email and I'll send you a free link. Send me an email at harleysch@gmail.com, because we believe that if the American people they're essentially good, but they've been terribly informed. If they get the truth, they'll act in the proper way.
Harley, I'd like to thank you. When somebody like yourself gets put on a kill list, there are two things that can happen. One, where you go into hibernation, and the other is you raise the ante. takes an incredibly courageous individual to raise the ante, which is exactly what you did. Harley, your perseverance, your dedication, and your sacrifice is unparalleled.